Okay, we're back again here at allpointstv.com, and you are here for the 2 o'clock program that comes on Mondays, and we're here for an hour. Those of you who are coming in for the first time, we're very glad and very happy with the persons that have picked up our program and are carrying it over different networks. And I definitely want to commend the technicians here at the studio who are doing the job that I can't do. I'm not a technician, and I appreciate the ones who are. They do a very good job. There are people that are finding us out, and tell your friends about it. And we're trying to organize around some information that we can carry to November the 5th, because we got to do some work here on that date. That's the date of the election, next national election we're going to have, and we're going to be hopefully. My hope is that we're going to be putting in a new president, because what we have right now is just not working for this nation. And I want to call attention to a program you might want to go and pick up on YouTube. It played last night, Mark Levine's Sunday night program, Life, Liberty, and Levine, that comes on the Fox Network on Saturdays and Sundays at 8 o'clock. And last night, I think a pretty good job he did on Saturday as well. But last night, Mark Levine was really on fire with a lot of good points he was making about where we are right now. And we're not nearly where we should be based upon the founding of the country and what was intended by these great framers that we had that sat in that room for from May 25th. I'm talking about officially sat in the room. Some got there at different times, of the 55 delegates that will eventually arrive at the will turn into a constitutional convention. And arriving at different times, the transportation was one issue, and then some of it was that they were sending delegates late. Some of them didn't send. Rhode Island didn't send in delegates at all, and so a lot of different things were going on behind the closed doors and decision making in those decision making centers. But 55 eventually will show up, and what they did in that room, the same room in which the draft of the Declaration of Independence written by Thomas Jefferson had been gone over and revised to some extent. Didn't make any major revisions, but some of the things they had to alter because Thomas Jefferson got a little bit beside himself with some of the things he was saying, and it was so. Some of the comments that Jefferson made in the original declaration were so accusatory. All of it was true, but it was so accusatory that they had to tone some of it down. And some of it had to be toned down because of the inheritance they were getting ready to, a lot of it was an inheritance issue, where some of the things the British were doing fell into their laps. And so some of the accusations that were being made in the Declaration of Independence, all of it was in fact true, but it came back to on their shoulders because of the fact that you're hearing some of those traditions, and they had to be very leery about some of the accusations being made, because the way it would have played into those in whose hands those things that were being accused by Jefferson that were being carried out by King George III, they were passed down into the newly freed country. I see the framers a little bit different than most of these scholars do, and all of those that are trying to make an accusation against the framers and all of that, which none of it actually resonates if you know the history of what was really going on here. And if you really understand the documents that they created, which was 2 anti-slavery documents, and you scholars don't agree with that, but I tell you what you're not going to do, you're not going to come out here and challenge anything publicly on that issue, not in the post that I'm putting on. And the post I'm putting on right now, quite frankly, I'm going into some areas that nobody's ever gone into before. And they they can claim they have this training. They don't have this training. And it took me a long time to understand what was really going on, because I could tell what they were saying on TV. I call them television scholars, but I could tell when I was listening to on television that they had not been trained in this area, because I knew they could not be saying the things they're saying if they had this training. But anyway, to make a long story short, that Mark Levine, you did a very good job last night and carrying out some things here that you're saying. The word they're using is unprecedented, and I'll get into that later on as well. But these things that are happening right now are unprecedented, and we need to understand why it is coming out now. And it's coming out because of the MAGA movement. The MAGA movement has done a tremendous job for this country, even if they don't in the end, and I hope this would not be true, that in the end, November the 5th, when the end result of what they've been working on doesn't, even if it doesn't materialize in terms of getting Biden out of there, and I think that will happen, but if it doesn't happen, the MAGA movement has already done a very great service for this country.
I think this has even done more than the Tea Party movement, because I think that
Very
rapidly
much so.
got commandeered by. There's so many groups that are claiming to be Tea Party, and they're like mainstream. A lot of them were Democrats, and they were just using that title to creep in. I mean, and then was it Paul Ryan? Was it, or he was supposed to be their darling, one of their darlings. He got tucked in, he got pulled in there, and he became rapidly corrupted. From my understanding.
Yeah, he went in there because he was corrupted. They went in there to corrupt that movement. They're not Tea Party. It's nowhere close to it. They went there to do the same thing to the Tea Party they did to Donald Trump. They were inside of the during the time that Donald Trump was president. They couldn't do it out in the open so much because the people were behind Donald Trump. See, Donald Trump did something different to get to be the president of the United States. He went to the people and built a base in the population, and then rode the wave of their support into the White House. That had never been done before. We've never had a president before, Donald Trump, that had not had either some political experience coming up through the beltway, through the corridors of different levels of power. We never had that, or didn't have some military experience. And so Donald Trump is cut out of a different piece of cloth, and they were not ready for a person coming out of nowhere as he did, with no political resume. He did have a business resume, but didn't have a political resume. And he came out of nowhere and launched himself based upon the trajectory of the people, placing him into the political network. And this man was off and running. And anybody watching it could see what was happening, even though they were telling us in the controlled media, telling us that our lying eyes were telling us a different story than what was really going on, because they were telling us that this man was a laughing stock. Well, we weren't laughing because we didn't see a laughing stock out there. We saw a man that was seriously challenging the power structure. And they laughed all the way up until November the 8th, 2016. But on the 9th of that month, they weren't laughing anymore. And why was that? Because what they've been laughing about, and through their laughter covering up, it was not our eyes that were lying, it was their eyes that were lying. And they were lying because no eyes are as blind as the eyes that refuse to see. And those of us who were watching it, a lot of you were watching it, you saw those crowds and what those crowds mean, particularly when you looked at the contrast in terms of the crowd that Joe Biden was getting in 2020, and also what Hillary Clinton was getting in 2016. Don't forget, she was supposed to be the stronger of the two candidates. And the question you should be asking about that election and the one that followed it, the one in 2020, is if that was the going understanding that Hillary Clinton was a strong candidate than Joe Biden, then how did he eclipse her in terms of the outcome in 2020 and how she did so poorly in 2016? Somebody should ask this question: what happened? And what happened is in 2016, MAGA, the Make America Great Again movement, Make America Great Again, uh, again, that movement happened because how many Americans you think in this country? I'm not talking about the leadership. They're not. They're not trying to make America great. If America is made great, then the question that the question for them is that if the country is made great, then what role are they going to play in that greatness? They're not great, and they would have had nothing to do with making the country great. There would have been the MAGA movement. There would have been Donald Trump. There would have been those in the Republican Party and those that crossed over into that party because they're also about the business of making the country great again. There were people joining in Trump's effort, in the MAGA movement's effort to make the country great again. Where does that leave them? Particularly those persons in the Democratic Party, most of whom have turned toward the Communist Party, as quiet as it's kept. You look at those relationships and see the ties that they have with China, and the ties they have with Ukraine. Because what are those ties? Those ties are there's a combination of communism, Nazism, Ukraine. This idea that you're talking about democracy with Ukraine, I don't know where you get that from. Go look at Ukraine and what's happening in Ukraine. We're not looking at democracy there. We're looking at something very different from that. And there are a lot of Nazis inside of the Ukrainian government. That is one of the reasons why they're having the problems they're having.
It's just really weird. Okay, Zelensky's actually known to be Jewish. He actually
George Soros type.
Yeah, and then he also depended upon the Nazis to actually make, like to fight the Russians.
Mm-hmm.
And then he actually, what I just read too somewhere, I don't know if it's reliable, somebody could tell me, he cannot actually speak Ukrainian. He was getting tutored in the language,
right?
But he was the president of this country. He can't speak the language of.
That's right.
So, I mean, wow. I mean, this wasn't an organic movement to install. I mean, would you? Well, now maybe that's a possibility. You think the United States or England would want to install a non-English speaking person amongst their leadership? Why would you, a person who didn't understand your own language?
Yeah, you're making a very good point. Zelensky was chosen out of the area in which he has some expertise. He didn't have any expertise in government. He had expertise as a comedian. And they chose him after they overthrew the elected official in 2014. There was a coup, Western coup, that took place in Ukraine. And the person that is probably grounded in the most expertise in this area is the professor over at the University of Chicago, and that is John Mearsheimer. If you listen to what he has to say, you'll learn a lot about what is going on in this fiasco that's taking place, because we just gave Ukraine another, 40 to 60 billion dollars in a losing cause, because there's no way that Ukraine is going to defeat Russia. You can just get off that right now and stop telling American people that lie, among a lot of other lies you've been telling. But John Mearsheimer does a very good job in going through the what occurred leading up to what's happening right now in 2024. But it started 10 years ago when the duly elected official there, which was found to be unpalatable to the Western encroachment, which had been going on ever since the unification of Germany. And people need to go and read about that and understand why that occurred. It was a bargaining that Russia was trying to do with NATO to give a unity of Germany, East and West Germany. And in return, NATO would stop coming further and further into Eastern Europe in the sphere of influence where Russia was. And they promised to do that, by the way, by the unification of being allowed of East Germany and West Germany. But then, as you know, after they had gotten an okay and approval to do so in terms of the unification of Germany, they then hedged back on they circled back and did what they have done repeatedly in their dealings. Because the United States, quite frankly, and this is my country, but I will tell you, I do not excuse it because it's my country. This country has a lot of baggage that is carrying in the international arena. And it really thinks, the leaders do, not the American people themselves. The American people are basically great. It's not the American people themselves. It's the American leadership. That's a tremendous problem, both here and outside the country. You go outside, I'll be outside the country for a month. And I'll be engaged in a lot of conversations both in Europe and in Africa. And I'll be doing a lot of listening. I have a lot of questions to raise and a lot of statements to make, but I'll be doing a lot of listening. But I've heard them in the past when I've traveled. And when I travel for that period of time, I'm going on a learning expedition. But what I know I'm going to hear is that they're not stomaching the things that are being said here by the American leadership. And they do not buy the aggression is that of Putin. They're not buying that. You can say that on the networks here, and people that will buy it because they don't have because the information they get is controlled by the state. But outside, where you have a more international flavor of the information, we have the idea we have a widespread amount of information that is delivered in this country because we have a number of networks. But if you listen to them very carefully, you find that in those networks, it's almost like a seancing of the information where they're all seeing it the same way, and they're using some of the same language. Go and listen to them sometimes on CNN, MSNBC, and the rest of those alphabet soup networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, and on a given day, when they're discussing an issue, they're using the same words. And so that shows me there's a coagulation going on in terms of a centrality that is in fact the feeder of the information to different sites, and all they're doing is reading a script. It's too many. The words are too similar, too often for that be happenstance. It's not happenstance. It's actually coming out of a control.
Did you see a few years ago, there was a CNN, one of the major networks, was supposed to have two different reporters reporting in two different locations in the separate, the opposite coast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're standing in a parking lot in both shots. Okay, presumably it was supposed to be different, on different coasts, so definitely going to be different parking lots. So that is an awful big parking lot. When they show one shot, there's a car passes by one reporter, and then the same car shows up on the other one, and basically somebody did a shot. These two people were just a few lanes away from each other in the same parking lot, and the car passes by the same car. And somebody notices all this. I mean, it's the same exact car. And they actually did have a shot of the two different ones facing different directions, but occupying different parking spots in different different positions in that same parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John, it's amazing how the public, the non-discerning public, let's put it that way, these people that are running this country, these usurpers of the authority of the that's given to them by the law and by the Constitution. That's two different things, by the way. And it's amazing the usurpation that takes place in this country. The information that they disseminate, that's what John is describing here. It may seem like it has a decentralized center where there is named differently, and so you would not see the synoptic aspect. But there is a synoptic aspect because you can see the wording could not on such a regular basis be so happenstance like that, and the words be the same in their reporting on a certain issue. There has to be some party, some central network that's feeding that. And I knew it from having read a number of the works, but one of the works that you could read and I know this sounds like strange because of who this person is, but I'm talking about just Jesse Ventura. Jesse Ventura, you can say what you want to about him, but he's a fearless, out of the box thinker. And this former governor, he did the same thing, by the way, before Trump did it, and that was, in fact, come out of nowhere. The man was a wrestler, but came out of nowhere and ran for the governor of Minnesota, and shocked everybody. He was a laughing stock before he won, just like Donald Trump was a laughing stock before he won in 2016. They're not laughing now. They're taking him very seriously now because they know that if they're going to continue down this road they're going down, this man has got to be stopped. And how the October surprise, or even before October, will happen, there is a surprise that's in place, and how it's carried out and how it is in fact undertaken, that remains to be seen. But go back and look at some of the documents. John Mearsheimer is just one of them. There are others out there. There's this great professor at Princeton University, and when you hear me talking about these Ivy League institutions, professors there, very rarely am I going to be quoting anything they say, because they're all caught up in their own network, and I don't think many of them can be trusted. They've gotten so much nuts on these college campuses, but there are some good ones still out there. And one of the ones over at Princeton University is Jeffrey Sachs, who is very, very independent. These are the independent ones. Mearsheimer is independent over there in Chicago, totally detached from the system. It would be something to see him at Hillsdale. I mean, not that would be not equivalent based upon the kind of I mean, he wouldn't go to Eastern either. The point is that there's a certain amount of prestige to go with these larger universities, these larger academic universities. But Mearsheimer is that guy, that person, at one of those persons at the University of Chicago. And Jeffrey Sachs is certainly one of them at Princeton. Don't know too many others that you put on that level. But they're straight shooters, and they are talking about the role the U.S. is playing outside the country. You don't see this because it's not reported in the controlled news media. Jesse Ventura does a very good job of it in his work. I think I read every book he put out because I love the independence of his thought. He doesn't write scholarly work, but I would take less scholarship for more honesty because I'm not getting it in a lot of the scholarly works. And some of the scholarly works, like the book by, like for example, the book by Judge Napolitano, there's some scholarly work behind what he does, but sometimes it's not scholarly title. He thinks it is. For example, the book called The Constitution in Exile, and the Constitution not in exile. I think Napolitano was pulling punches here. The Constitution not in exile. It's been overthrown. If it's exile, though, the point here to be made, if it's in exile, then you don't need to name the perpetrators. But if it's overthrown, then the names have to be called up. And I think he was pulling a punch here by placing it in exile because it's just over here somewhere rather than where it is. It ain't gone anywhere. It's still here in this country. But what is happening in the country is it's overthrown. And the question here is, who caused it? You see, that's why nobody is saying the things I'm saying on Facebook. I'm going to tell you something. I'm not going to pull it. I'm not going to pull any punches. Whatever happens, happens. And I know I'm surveilled in this country. I can tell that even when I'm leaving the country, I can tell it. Because I'm many times asked to stand over to the side while other people go through it and they have to do some other checking on the computer. As I could go up there and put my credentials up there, I got my passport, and I don't have, they don't ask too much for the visa, but I do have the visa, and I got another year on my visa to what places I'm going to, because I have multiple visa permits. And the last year my visa will be this year, but I have some additional years on the passport itself. But I noticed when I'm leaving out the country, I noticed that they always do that. Not always, but most times they'll do some additional typing that's required before I'm allowed to board. I have every other thing to get on, but they are trying to they're trying to find out what the asterisk apparently is about. And so I see that in different venues where I go. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised about these people you think are on your side, or that they are in Washington representing you. You'd be surprised. But read these articles I'm writing on Facebook, particularly the one today, and really the series. I finished the series today about MAGA and about the MAGA movement, which I think is the premier movement. If this country is going to break out of what it's facing right now, it will do it. It will do it this year. If it's not done, if we do not, I'm talking about if we do not win in November, then winning is not only impossible, it's unthinkable. If you can't, if this country cannot turn itself around with the MAGA movement being at its peak, it will never be higher at its peak than it is right now, because it's riding on a crest that is a phenomenon. That if this phenomenon does not succeed, it cannot be done, because under the present circumstances, it will require something else. I'm not going to even get into that, but it requires something else beyond these ramifications. But if that does not materialize in terms of a win in November the 5th to be exact, put that on your calendar. If that does not prevail and the people win, it's the people versus the oligarchs. That's the struggle that's going on.
They fear that because you hear about the expansion of the FISA warrants, which are, warrantless searches, warrantless surveillance it can do on Americans.
Mm-hmm.
So they're scared. And both parties allow this. So there's no safe haven. Every one of them wants to have. What are they spying on us for? We have no ability to transfer weapons, large sums of cash to anybody who is a threat to our national security. Why the hell do we got to be watched?
Yeah.
They're the ones that are making the backdoor deals for each other. Why are they putting more scrutiny upon us?
That's why we have to be watched, because if the people find out what they're doing, you see, it's a lot of the information is not control, just to control the information. The information is control to control the people. If the people find out, the people know how these people have taken this country that was great. And it was great in the time period in which the founders were in that room creating this nation. They created what the creation on paper is absolutely unbelievable. What's down on the papyrus that they put this down. What is written as the documents of the country, the first in history where a country at the founding point had defined itself as what the founding was about. That never happened before. The American Revolution is not the first revolution in the world, but it's the first revolution where the founders of the founding fathers, let's say it that way, the founding fathers of the country set in motion the glue the strictures, the restraints upon power at the outset of the country. That had never happened before, where you start out with particulars about how the government is to construct and to view itself, how it is to carry out its mandates. And the mandates are, in fact, restricted to the government. Go read the Article 1, Section 8 clauses 1 through 18 of the Constitution. And what you see here is a delegation of powers. You can call it what it's called in most of the news, the enumeration. But understand that, the enumeration of powers, where they're going down, and listen to how it is stated in the document. Congress shall not. Listen to that very carefully. And then ask yourself the question, why is it that they're prohibiting it and aiming it at Congress? You know why? Because the founding fathers of this nation were in that room, and they had understood the antecedent that had gone before what they were doing in that room. And the antecedent was the Articles of Confederation. And the Articles of Confederation set up a single polity, and that polity was a Congress. There was no executive branch, and there was no judicial branch. And so in the creation of something new, coming underneath the umbrella of the Articles of Confederation, they set out then to restrain power. And the power at that point, and the power they felt would be most easily going out of control, was the power of the legislative body, because it's making the law. And if they make the law so that they are restricting freedoms, that could be an endangerment of the revolution and what they were fighting for and putting in place in Philadelphia 12 years after they stood up. 11 years, but then 12 years when they ratified the document in 1788. But 11 years when they're meeting in Philadelphia to draft the document to overshadow and overcome the vicissitudes of the Articles of Confederation, which were flawed and could not have been revised. You had to really take the best from the document, which was the idea of holding down power. That's the best of the document. But the way that they did it was such that it could not be sustained. You had to create a new document based on the idea that power has to be restrained. And to the great glory of the framers, by the way, they were able to come up with something there, because the way the articles had done it was just simply not give them any power. There's no, you have to have unanimity for the government to move. And that does what? It stifles the government. There's no movement if all of them got to agree on everything the government has to do. You got to get all 13 states to comply with the activity. You just can't. You cannot get unanimity on every issue. There's going to be somebody in some state itself that's going to disagree with the others, at least one. And so they have to have unanimity. That was just too much to ask for in a place where you expect the people to be in charge. The people you're never going. That's another thing I say about the idea of there being unity on anything. People will never be unified. Now you could talk about unified on what, and maybe around a certain issue you could have that. But in terms of people just being unified for the sake of being unified, and they're unified on all things, and that's never going to happen. But to get to their great credit, they knew that government had to be chained down, and what they did in it was they found a new way to do it. Rather than absenting any power that's accruing to the power center, which was the legislative body at this time under the Articles, then the idea was that if you're going to create different bodies, and that would be one way of limiting the power by dispersing it. But how would you restrain power? Well, they found a way to do it. Separate it, disperse it by the separation, and then have the body politic, the three branches, having jealousy of the power that accrued in that particular part of the government, and then to not allow the encroachment through the separation of powers and through the fact that each branch was to be checked on by the other two branches. Neither branch wanted the other to get hegemony over the other. That was the idea, to pit them, to really pit them against each other in competition, so that through the competitiveness of the controls that was given to them through the delegation of powers, the enumeration of powers, they would then stay in their lane. That's the idea. And it was a brilliant idea, brilliant, something that had, that's why it's so copied, because the idea was brilliant. And what are you going to do to come behind that and create what? What are you going to create in behind that, of those 55 men who eventually met in that room? What are you going to say on the other side of that meeting from May 25th to September 17th? What else can be done to add to that? Well, so far the answer is nothing, because everybody has copied this document. You may not see it. I was in South Africa and saw it. The Rainbow Constitution. Yeah, rainbow, all right. Taken out of James Madison, John Jay, and Alexander Hamilton's pen. That's the rainbow. And go and read it, and go read into them that's in the world. Even the ones in the dictatorial world. That Constitution reads the same way, just don't follow it. The copy is universal. They have not created anything better than that. And we have got to understand how we are losing it, while they are smiling in our face all the time, trying to take the place of the framers. Because they are backstabbing us, and they're backstabbing the framers by what they're doing. And I give you credit, Mark Levine. I give you a lot of credit, because you did a program last night that everybody in this country should see. You did a very good job, and I give you credit for that. When I don't agree with Mark Levine, I will say so. But when he does something that should be credited, I'm not against anyone moving in the direction toward where we have to go, and we have to go back. We have to go back. And Mark Levine is one of the persons that, on occasion, takes the nails and put them in the right part of that needs to be nailed down, and nails it down. Did it last night with his guests that were great. But they were talking about this attack that's going on against MAGA. These attacks are not by happenstance and by accident. They have to stop this movement. This movement has to be stopped. In America, you don't have to help them in that. You need to understand that your role right now is that you have given some tools to fight back with, and you need to use those tools now. If you don't use them, you will lose them forever. You're not going to have a movement like this again. Just like you've never had the movement that created the circumstance for the American Revolution. You're not going to have that again. That's a one-time. That's a once in a lifetime event. You couldn't do that today. But can we say that without you getting mad? You can't do that today. You could not do today what those framers did. You could not do what George Washington did in terms of him standing up against the British Army. That can't be done. Not with the rigors they had to go through. It cannot be done. You're not willing to. Nobody is willing to suffer those kinds of where you are frostbitten out there and having to fight in the snow, wearing socks or any kind of cloth over your feet and walking in the snow, leaving a blood trail, the trail of tears. You're not going to be able to do that with this softness of this country today. Cannot be done. And we got a way to non-violently confront these people who are ruling this country and running it down. And if it does not happen, if we do not make this thing work, November the 5th, I am convinced, and that's what I'm writing in my Facebook post, I am convinced that if this movement cannot get it done, it cannot be done under peaceful circumstances. Now there are some other things can be done, but that would be more horrific, because where it stops, nobody knows. That's what happened to the. That's what distinguishes our revolution, and what distinguished the revolution in France 13 years later. They saw what happened over here and were inspired by it. But look what happened over there in France. Something very different happened there. When they started the bloodletting, they couldn't stop.
You know, the reason why I think theirs degenerated so rapidly and so horrifically is because
John, you kind of got.
The reason why the one in France, revolution in France, degenerates so rapidly and horrifically is because they had atheism at the center of it. You know, in denial of the Christianity and Christian principles. And
that's the point.
Because we believed in a rule of law, and God wanted law and rules, but they also knew that when they went off the rails, we had to reestablish, but only go as far as we did to reestablish it.
That's
they
right,
rejected God out of hand, and that's why it degenerates so horribly.
That is a very incisive point. It's right on the mark, because that is the difference between. You see, this is another thing that we don't get. The morality behind the revolution. Once the revolution was over, the bloodletting was over.
Because I had friends, I got a friend's family who actually are loyalists. They were loyal. They were in this country before the time of the revolution.
The Tories.
And they were, and then they went to Canada, and they were there for several years, and then they came back, and they've been involved in the United States since then. And they openly talk about it. I guess the only time I've heard some sporadic violence, some people, but mostly the Tories were pretty well-heeled people, and they left mansions behind.
Not institutionalized by the state.
Right, exactly. But it was actually a lot of it was land grants and stuff given by the state of England, the king of England, which represents the state there.
Yeah.
But a lot of their properties though were locked up when they fled, and it was largely unmolested. There was occasional spread, like in bigger cities like Boston, or where it was more center of for the change. Like there's more zeal. Some things did happen, like abusive stuff. Some people broke in and stole items from these houses. A lot, but mostly were left intact. That's a big difference between the French Revolution, because they tried their rejection, their atheism. And see, that's one thing you make up the point. You pick up the point you made. You couldn't have the revolution happen here. You couldn't have something because you've got so many factions here. It would degenerate so rapidly. Yeah. There would be no chance for ever having any kind of consistent and cohesive government ever again.
Yeah, John, you're making a great point. We have to understand the greatness. This country was founded in greatness. And that's why I am going to be fearless in terms of confronting those who are undoing, not trying to undo, who are undoing that which was put in place in 1787. We are fighting to restore. Making America Great Again is trying to restore the greatness of this country. And I have a certain, I'm not sure people go along with me on this, but I do think I can date when the greatness of what they had fought for was overthrown in this country. I think I can date it, but I'm still doing some research to make sure when I come out with what my particulars are, I'm not just going to be out here just emoting and just stating things for the sake of stating. I want to research it first and make sure that I'm right in terms of when we get off the rail. But I do have a date for it, and where we began to go from the framers and then began to go downhill. Not on the steep decline we're on right now, but certainly it began to pick momentum up over time. And you can see certain presidents where it was accelerated. You'd be surprised some of the persons that I'm going to be naming when I get this conversation about it. But those of those that are out here fighting this fight to end this peacefully and to resolve it within the context of what the framers gave us, because they gave us the formula to be able to fight back. The Second Amendment is not in the Constitution as an accident, nor is the geography in the Constitution an accident either. See, I've been contending here for a while now, and I'm absolutely right in this, probably the only one saying it in this country, is that there's a geography to the Constitution of the United States. If that were understood, these so-called constitutional scholars would not be making mistakes they're making. They would not, for example, be placing the requirements for the removal of an office holder, a federal office holder, president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States. They would not be placing that requirement for the removal, which is in Article 2 of the Constitution, and placing it back in Article 1, where it does not belong in terms of carrying out the impeachment process and setting up how that would play out and what particular body it plays out of for the impeachment and what body it plays out in terms of the trial in the Senate. Would not be making that mistake. And let me tell you something else here while I'm on this point. Last week, you saw something that you're not seen before. See, a lot of things are going on here you need to understand. And I think a lot of you do. Last week, or was it the week before last, where they got around to impeaching Alejandro Mayorkas, Homeland Security Secretary. Now, maybe you didn't see it this way, but I will tell you that this is the way it should be viewed. Mayorkas was thrown up as red meat by the Republican Party. They knew somebody had the answer for what we can see with our lying eyes. We could see Mayorkas was lying. We could see on TV every day people coming across this border like this border would look like Swiss cheese down there.
It looks like the gates of Cedar Point. I mean, that's what it does, man.
John, they come across that border as if they have no respect for the laws, immigration laws of this country, which they don't have respect for it. And why would they if the laws are not being enforced?
And the state of Illinois allows illegals to become law enforcement officers. People have totally disregard for our existing laws, are going to decide who they're going to enforce laws upon here for the courts.
They don't fear, and they do that because they don't fear the American people. The people are standing for this. They're voting for these people repeatedly, over and over again, putting them back in power.
They keep on, well, every time you bring up, they got this thing about, look at the history of racism and xenophobia in the United States. Well, as if, I like to point out, anybody, if I go to any African nation or any Chinese or nobody, I'm the white guy walking around there. I'm not going to be treated with all due respect and given carte blanche approval and have all the rights extended to me. So, I mean, everybody's the same way on that. But you're all meant to create equal. Yes, but there's also a process which by you recognize equality by a affirmation through the process for immigration and naturalization. It's like you're saying, I'm willing to become part of your society by following your laws, and I'm going to do it from the start. That's what it's about.
John, the people that are coming in this country know that the people running the country don't have respect for the laws, and they come across there to join in. Did you see that sign that said, Biden, let us in? They're appealing to the President of the United States. The President is the chief enforcement officer of the United States. They know the President of the United States is supposed to enforce the law. They got a sign up saying, Joe Biden. Biden didn't say Joe. They said, Biden, let us in. They want this. They would appeal to the president, the chief law enforcer in the country, appealing to him to violate the laws of the country. And he's over here talking about how those that come should come. They had heard that and they were coming. But anyway, what they did in it, knowing that our lying eyes were seeing some reality here, and that reality was that these people come across our border like a Swiss cheese, and nobody is stopping them. When somebody tries to stop them, the court intervenes, and then there's very little resistance really because nobody's stopping at the border. They're coming across those borders with very very little kind of fear of being caught, and then they're running. And once they get over here on the side, the court takes up, and then you got to go through this long process of tell them to come back. You give them some papers to show up, and then they promise to come back with the idea to come back 2 months' time, living in the country and find a way to escape the authorities. And who thinks they're going to come back two months later for a trial date that you set up, letting them into the country? Nobody's holding them until the trial date. They're supposed to come back for the trial that you're going to set at some arbitrary date that is set up for them to be tried for breaking the law. Nobody does that even believe they'll show up. It's not even intended for them to show up. Oh, that's the escape route, intended as such, because our leaders are not serious. But look, the country had shown had moments of greatness coming out of the what do you call it, like a horse race, coming out of the blocks, off and running. The gates have been open, and it's been triggered by what they did in Philadelphia. And we were off and running. The world was watching. They were watching us because they were seeing another attempt, not the first attempt. They were looking at the latest attempt to do something that the world had tried on numerous occasions. And each of those occasions, it had ended up the same way. And what Constantine Bonnet wrote about, the French writer, wrote about in the 1780s, the ruins of empire. Each one of them had ended the same way. And so when the country set out to do that again, the country was sitting on the sideline because it was done in a different way than it had been done in the past, and they were watching how it would play out. They were watching this experiment and really cheering for it, because if it could happen here, it could happen elsewhere. And they were watching George Washington, one of the 5 great men in the world at that time, watching what he would do. And their mouths were opened by what he did, particularly when he disavowed power on 2 occasions. They'd never seen that before. See, we don't even understand how great this country was. And when Donald Trump says, "Make America great again," that's not lightweight stuff. To make it great again as it was there, you would have to have different leadership than you have right now.
Hey, I love when the Democrats will try to say MAGA means it's a racist thing, make America great again. Like you want to go back in the 1920s, 1930s. I'm going to say the most vulnerable members of your society are usually people who are usually minorities, and they're economically deprived, and they're having a chance to go develop themselves because a lot of times they've been denied activity, ability to go to institutions of higher education, if that's really truly the route to do it. I personally advocate going to vocational training schools, but anyway, so your most vulnerable society members are those who will actually appreciate that they actually joined. Even if they, just be crass about it. If anybody wanted to stay on welfare rolls, they were happy with that lifestyle. When people were having more money available to them every day, and we're spending more domestically instead of I'd rather spend the money we bring into our government on domestic things instead of embroiling ourselves in international affairs and wars like we currently do. And there's no payoff on that. Mm-hmm. But we do have enjoy a benefit of probably reduced crime and need and stuff like that if we sent the money here, kept the money here. But no, we can't do our infrastructure because they say they have lack of funds. But we just cut checks to Israel and Ukraine, a money of what, $90 billion? Mm-hmm. So $90 billion wouldn't go a long way in this country. And they're so hesitant they're so concerned about other countries' affairs, they're letting our country erode. That's horrible. It makes no sense.
Well, John, that's why they don't allow the American people to vote on these issues. Listen to Andrew Tate. He's another one of those persons out there that is a loose cannon. Listen to him sometime. Well, he's talking about how they fix elections. He said that if you were he made an analogy of the basketball court. If you were on a basketball court and you didn't have a referee, and they promised $10,000 to the person who would win, he would say, "Would you, on those conditions, be prone to cheat?" And the guy that was asking the question to said, "Yes, I think you can say that a person would be more prone to cheat under those circumstances." He said, then if that would be true of a basketball game, then what do you think about it in terms of you're being elected to what they call the leader of the free world? You don't think that they would cheat? Because if they did not cheat, you can't take a chance on losing. They don't. That's the going rate. They can't take a chance on losing. If the voters were voting on all these things that they're doing, very little of it would pass because the American people don't approve of it. They don't approve of giving all this money to Ukraine. What the American people want to do is have this war brought to an end. They don't have any incentive to bring it to an end because it's a money laundering operation through which they benefit. Look at their bank accounts. Look at the bank accounts of those persons prosecuting Trump. Fanu, they want to say is not Fanny. So, given the French pronunciation, Fanu Willis. Look at her bank account and tell me, how does she get $6 million in her bank account on a salary of a little bit more than $100,000 a year? Much of that eaten up in terms of the expenses of living from year to year. How has she got a bank account, got $6 million? And over in New York, where Letitia James is Secretary of State, how does she have a bank account of $15 million? Can you say George Soros? That's who backed them. And that's what they're carrying out. That's what's undermined the framers. And that's why I'm going to be writing against them, because the framers are going to be defended by my pen, if nothing else. There's going to be order in this court. If there's no order in any other court in the country, certainly no order in these courts that's run by these politicians on these courts, these court benches. Most of these persons are politicians, including those on the Supreme Court. We have politicians on the court. I wrote if you read my article today, you will have learned more, not bragging, but you would have learned more than you would learn at 99 and 9/10% of the universities teaching in this area here. Because I have to tell you something. There's nobody in this country teaching what I'm teaching about the Constitution. Nobody, none of them on this level. You can take that. You can take that for what it is.
Maybe we could get you like an appointment at Hillsdale. You'd love that, wouldn't you?
Hillsdale would be in the wheelhouse, because I have a lot of respect for what Hillsdale is doing. There are some. See, John just said a minute ago that he would recommend trade schools. He's right, because it would not do the brainwashing they're doing at these universities. These people paying big money to go to Columbia, Princeton, Yale, Cornell, Brown, and the rest of them, because they think that because of the names that those universities stand for that today, what they stood for in the past. Those are not the same institutions that were in the past.
No, I mean, actually, I went to Mott, and then I've been around educational institutions most of my adult life, and I worked there, and I knew the culture. I mean, well, between two educational institutions, and basically, college professors and the college mindset basically is they're always looking for a new paper or a new article or a new book is going to come out. Mm-hmm. It's going to destroy all the myths and deconstruct all what everything else built on. And they act like that's like a great thing, but they don't ask themselves, what happens if we actually follow this? Every few months you got a new book coming out. So you're in the process of destroying, according to this one product. Now you see a new book. It's like this noveltiness, everything's about novel, like, well, this is different. This is even more earth shattering or interesting. And they're whim worshippers, as Ayn Rand would call them. They flip around back and forth, and you can't do that. You can do that in your own life. You can destroy your own life, whatever, but you don't have a right to do that on a societal level. It should question the ability to do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, you just can't keep on flipping around like an eel in a bucket. I mean, it's ridiculous.
If I were to go to Hillsdale College, the person I want to talk to over there is Folsom, who put this book out on the New Deal. I forget the title of it right now, but it's a very good, well-written book.
Burton Folsom, or
Folsom.
Yeah, Burton Folsom. I think
that's him.
Yeah, he also did the book about the myth of the robber barons.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, he actually was at the University of Michigan one time. He and a professor there who was from I think he was the either history department, had a debate about the myth of the robber baron, and a lot of people, of course, their academics said that I think it was a guy named Schrader that was the professor at U of M and Flint here, mm-hmm. that debated.
I know Schrader.
Yeah, they claim that he was the one that scored more points. But Burton Folsom's book has been used a lot to deflect a lot of criticism of the capitalist system and stuff.
Yeah, I can see why. That would be one person I would love to have a conversation with. Not very many of them, because I I have to tell you something. These persons on television, all these television scholars, as I call them, I don't, I would not want to have a conversation with them because what they're talking about is so far off the lane. I can't see myself talking to somebody like Lawrence Tribe. Lawrence Tribe is out of his mind. The things this man is saying, none of that stuff is true. He better not say it.
Well, another thing is, if
He better not say it here.
Well,
You say it here.
see, I was a low life because I was like a student and I was also a student worker at the college when I was there. And if you ask any question that would challenge the narrative they're offering up, you are not allowed to question it. They say it's an institution of education and inquiry. That's a load of crap. If you question anything, they're going to jump on you like it's, like you're like a football player on the field. They're going to try to sack you.
Yeah.
They're going to try to bury you.
I've seen that. I run into that doing the undergraduate work. I run into some other places too. But undergraduate work was the first time I ran into it, where people are full of themselves. I had a teacher named that was Phi Beta Kappa from one of the top schools, and he didn't want you to say anything in his class. You raise your hand up there, and he would smote you. But that's the ego that's speaking. Some of them don't deserve that the commendations they're getting as being acknowledged as being scholars in the areas in which they're speaking. And they're speaking too much about things that they really have not done the research on, and they're overstating the case. And most of them in the area of the Constitution have done that. Anyway, the bottom line is that there are some people that are still fighting out here. You cannot be on the sideline at this point, folks. It's all hands on deck. We've got to win in November. We have a golden opportunity here to reverse the course. I'm not at all saying that I believe that it is going to happen, but at least there's a possibility of it because we do have a network to launch our efforts from. If we lose it on November the 5th, and we do not, in fact, change the course of this country, this trajectory of this country, then I think then that is not only impossible, it's unthinkable. Okay, we did some things here, and we'll be again next week. See you next week on the same topic, some of the same topic. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.